Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is KidNativeBloodyElbow.com, joined once again by Zane Simon for the 6th round of the Ultimate Fighter Tournament of Champions finale, or Tough 24 finale, featuring the Flyweight Championship bout between Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson and the unlikeliest challenger of all, Tim Elliott, who did what Tim Elliott does and fought his way into one of the tougher fights of Mighty Mouse's reign. 5-round unanimous decision for Mighty Mouse. Never really in danger, but a lot more awkward.
He was in danger. I mean, I think he was pretty
close
there was
to the close submission attempt.
Yeah. I honestly, I mean, people hated this online, which I thought is funny because people don't give a shit about Demetrius Johnson, but I gave 2 rounds to Tim Elliott. I thought he won the 3rd round fighting off his back when Johnson was blanket, more or less. But
fair enough.
Unfortunately, I think it's one of those things where a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh man, Tim Elliott's awesome," and B, a lot of people are going to be like, "Okay, I still don't give a shit about Demetrius Johnson." Like, it was a cool fight, but I think it was a fight that everybody expected Johnson to breeze through, and any struggle at all lowers the stock of a fighter that people already have trouble caring about.
And it's another 5-round decision for Mighty Mouse, which...
Yeah, it's a 5-round decision where late, when he had dominant, like, you know, people are like, oh, he had 20 minutes of control in this fight. It's like, yeah, and he did not get that much done.
No, he had a couple of submission attempts, some nice armbar attempts, some Kimura, pretty close Kimura attempt, a rear naked attempt, but he didn't have control of the lower body, so it didn't get that close. And Elliott had one really close submission attempt, but Aljamain Sterling was on Twitter bemoaning that Elliott doesn't try to win rounds. He'll get dominant position, and then he'll do something goofy, get dominant position, and then do something else goofy and lose it. And
I don't even know that that's. I don't know that that's fair against DJ. I think that was doing. Yeah, he's doing everything he could to get on top and stay on top and try to finish. I mean, I don't think that DJ is easy enough to hold down to say that Elliott losing position is a result of his own weirdness.
Fair enough. But I'm much more interested in the co-main event. Joseph Benavidez, Henry Cejudo, that was a much more fun fight. And we can combine the two a little bit. Benavidez survived some really enormous punches from Cejudo and a series of low blows that ended up costing Cejudo a point and probably the decision. Benavidez took a split decision, 27-29, 30-26, and 29-27.
It didn't cost Benavidez that decision at that point.
You don't think so?
Well, I mean, 30-26, somebody not only took a point from Cejudo, but gave Benavidez every round. And then Cejudo would have won one card, and he still, if Benavidez was 29-27, it would have been 29-28. He still would have lost,
That's true. And he would have had 30-27 on one card. So 2 judges saw completely different fights. I thought it was a very entertaining fight. Cejudo cracked harder, but he was wailing and missing a lot. And Benavidez was very poised, but ended up dropped on his butt a couple times, but was landing shots and making Cejudo miss. It was an excellent fight.
Yeah, I loved that fight. I thought it was an awesome fight. And, the biggest thing for me is it makes me kind of like the Elliott Johnson loss. It makes me more excited for the guy who lost. Like, seeing Cejudo, he has this very, meat and potatoes, I'm going to throw the same stuff over and over and over again striking game. But he's really adding more power into it and more diversity into it. He's wrestling more, and it's becoming a more complete fighting style that in a couple of years could make him a hell of a lot to handle.
I don't even know about waiting a couple of years. And Benavidez seems like he's diminished some. I mean, he earned the win, I thought, and it was a really ballsy performance because when you open up a fight, getting cracked by somebody that's like Cejudo, that is no fun at all. And to keep your poise, and the bruise under Benavidez's right eye looked nasty. It looked like, orbital bone cracky kind of bruise, the deep bleeding, big black eye, or not big, but very black eye. And but Benavidez, he was bobbing and weaving and hitting hard, throwing sharp, crisp combinations, and making Cejudo miss. But at the same time, he didn't look as physically powerful as he did just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, or at the very least, he didn't look as physically powerful as Henry Cejudo.
No.
I think it's a little of both.
Yeah, yeah, and at that weight, I mean, not many people
Um,
are as powerful as Henry
no,
Cejudo.
and that's the other thing too, though. With that win, are we now really hyped to see Joseph Benavidez versus Demetrius Johnson the third time?
Not really. No.
And that's the only title fight out there waiting. Like,
Yeah, that's the fight to make. And Benavidez earned it. He's got a long ass winning streak going. It's been a long time since they've fought. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to be really raging to see that fight, but I don't think people are going to be bitching about it that much either. And they're desperate for title fights. So, not that this one is a draw, but I still think they need to book it and do it and just move forward. But who does Cejudo fight?
Cejudo, I don't know. He's going to have to. I mean, I'd like to see him get a chance to take on somebody like John Moraga or Zach Makovsky or, one of the other guys who are
What about
floating
Tim
around.
Elliott, just coming off a loss?
Maybe Tim Elliott. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a little too, like, you actually have the ability to get Tim Elliott and Cejudo can both fight for the title again at some point in the future. And
True.
why spend one of them? Like, why give Cejudo his third straight loss? If Cejudo lost that fight, I would rather see him fight somebody like Moraga, somebody like I say, like Makovsky or Dustin Ortiz, or even like a Wilson Hayes, somebody who isn't really in contention but is at the top of the division.
Yeah.
Although Wilson Hayes is arguing that he should be in contention, so that'll be. I don't know that he'll have much of a case off a win over Yuta Sasaki, considering that Benavidez is beating Henry Cejudo. But yeah. I think there are fights out there for Cejudo to take against good but not title challenger good flyweights that can help rebuild him a little.
I see. It's interesting to see Elliott ascending through the ranks. Like, before this series of Ultimate Fighter, you would not be putting him in that category. I mean, he wasn't even ranked,
No, he was somebody that when he got cut, and a lot of people were like, oh my God, I can't believe they cut Tim Elliott. And, even I was like, yeah, he's a fun fighter, but he was also a really ineffective fighter when he got cut. He was a guy who did a lot of mean mugging, threw a lot of punches, but landed very few of them. I think even he has said, people are saying that even he has said he just didn't know how to strike when he got to the UFC the first time. And he's become a world's better fighter since then.
Yeah, he definitely has, and it's exciting to see the improvement. And the flyweight division, yeah, I mean, it is sort of frustrating to see Demetrius Johnson versus Joseph Benavidez coming up again, but I think it could be a very fun fight. I don't know.
Maybe the last time it was a cool first round knockout. I don't know. Maybe it would be. Maybe be better this time.
I mean, my expectations for Mighty Mouse fights, and he's had some good ones. He's put on some great performances, but I just can't help it. I'm just not enthused. I share the general malaise about Mighty Mouse. I don't know what it is. I like his coach, Matt Hume, legacy of MMA pioneering in the Pacific Northwest, fought in Japan, fought in Pancrase, fought Ken Shamrock in Pancrase, fought in Extreme Fighting Championship. So it's cool to see that lineage still active in modern MMA, but something about Mighty Mouse, unless he just rips off a first-round knockout, it just rarely tickles my fancy. But let's talk about a much more fun fight. Welterweight George Masvidal and Jake Ellenberger, TKO toe injury, 4 minutes, 5 seconds of the first round. Yeah. That does not do the fight justice. It was a fucked-up ending to what was shaping up to be a really good fight. George Masvidal comes out guns blazing, totally outclasses Ellenberger, but doesn't finish him. Looks like Ellenberger's beginning to get some wind in the sails. He charges into the cage and gets his toe stuck. Herb Dean blows the call, stops it. Ellenberger was not being tagged, really.
He was being tagged.
Well, but he wasn't like being cracked. I mean, he still had a fighting chance to get his toe out of there and not be knocked out. There's no real reason to stop that fight. I mean,
I think that is probably the biggest thing, is that there wasn't any reason to stop the fight necessarily.
Although he could see that the fighter was trapped, I think the rule needs to be changed, obviously. I mean...
Yeah. It's a weird one for me, because, like, the thing I'm kind of struggling with is, like, I do think that Ellenberger should challenge it. I think it should be overturned to a no contest. But it's not an actual malfunction with the cage. It's just the way the cage is built.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I think that's why I think they need to make a new rule. If the fighter becomes entangled in the cage, then you pause the action, get the fighter untangled from the cage, and continue. That's all they needed to do. It shouldn't be a fight stopper.
Because without that rule, though, it's a little like, kind of like, well, would it be the same rule as if somebody threw themselves headfirst into the mat on a takedown and knocked themselves out?
Well, but then in that case, they're unconscious, so they're able to continue.
But if they get to a point that they can't keep fighting. I mean, if Ellenberger's stuck in the cage, and you're like, well, he can't keep fighting from being stuck in the cage. It's one of those things. Like, I get why it got the fucked up ruling it got, and I hope Ellenberger challenges it, and I hope the result is a new rule.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Although I don't want to see Masvidal lose the win because I think he did. I mean, he did.
I want to see them rematch the fight.
That would be fun, but
a no contest and rematch the fight, hopefully really quickly. Put it on in like. I mean, I'd love to see it just in like a couple weeks, like little enough time
awesome.
That the guys don't have to go through a whole new camp for it. But
although Ellenberger's toe may be jacked, and
if his toe's jacked, then who knows?
Yeah, and with the kind of leather they were throwing, somebody could have a hurt hand, somebody could have a busted nose. I mean, but yeah, no, it was a fun fight though, and Masvidal. It reminds me very much of Gegard Mousasi's recent conversion into a deadly, hate-filled assassin. I mean, Masvidal definitely seemed like he was fighting with a vengeance. I mean, this was the Masvidal people have been waiting to see for a long time.
Well, I think the weird thing is kind of, I don't know, it was a very, I'm a little less hyped. I think it was a very Masvidal performance there where, like, he hurt Ellenberger, and then once he thought he couldn't get Ellenberger out quickly, he just took his foot way off the gas.
That's true.
And Ellenberger, and just did nothing for like a couple minutes. And then when Ellenberger started to pressure him again, and when Ellenberger actually started to take the fight to him again, that was when Masvidal was like, oh, okay, well, if you're going to fight me, then shit, I'll kick your ass again. And I think that kind of seems like Masvidal's one of his classic problems is that when he's winning, if the guy doesn't come after him, he's just like, well, I can just sit back and win. And then that's when he can just get outpointed, but Ellenberger doesn't have the style to outpoint somebody.
No, Ellenberger is pretty dependent on hurting people.
Yeah, and so when Ellenberger came in to hurt him, that's when Masvidal was just started wrecking shop again.
Yeah, he did, and he just looked so much faster and sharper than Ellenberger. It was really impressive to see, and hopefully we'll see more of that from Masvidal. And for Ellenberger, pretty disappointing performance because he looked so good last time, and I thought maybe it solved some of those problems. But Masvidal was a very underrated cat. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people got suckered into they forget that Matt Brown has always been weak to the body. He was hurt multiple times by Eric Silva to the body, dropped multiple times that way. And Ellenberger it's kind of, to me, it's like, well, Ellenberger hits harder than Eric Silva,
That he does. And before that, we had a pretty fun fight between light heavyweights, Jared Cannonier and Ion Kutalaba. This was a unanimous decision, but it was very action-packed and really had me going for Cannonier because Kutalaba started out the fight with some nonsense posing and posturing pre-fight, and I really enjoyed seeing Cannonier light him up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited because it's two guys at light heavyweight who could actually fight at light heavyweight, it seems like. Although Cannonier talking about dropping makes me, I don't know.
That was completely insane. I mean, this guy's been fighting at heavyweight. What's he want to do at middleweight? I mean, he's excited about his wife's abilities as a nutritionist, but yeah, let's stick with the light heavyweight. And,
he's obviously got the durability. He's got the athleticism. He's got the cardio. Like, he was – I could not believe that he kept Kutalaba's pace into round 3 because Kutalaba was fighting at a pace that light heavyweights do not fight at all.
It's true. And this is one of those fights where you come out, I want to see more of both these guys. I mean, both of these guys moved from don't cares to cares in a big way with this fight. Although Kutalaba is probably somebody I'll be rooting against, but I'll be excited to see him, and that's the name of the game. And then before that, and I got to say, this main card was pretty hot, all except for the opening fight, because Sarah McMahon submitted Alexis Davis in the second round, arm triangle choke. But this was a nice back and forth fight. Davis dominated the first round, and McMahon really had to show some heart and some savvy to make the adjustments and get the win in the second.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where like people often, I think, they expect fighters to get better, like, oh, they're going to add this big skill that they miss, that they don't have to their game. When in general, a lot of times what we actually see is they get better at the things they're already good at, and the things that they're bad at just tend to matter less. And McMahon's never become like a much better combination puncher or much better boxer, but she's much more aggressive and more willing to throw. And then on the ground, she still has some trouble being a bit of a blanket, and she still has some trouble with doing more with dominant positions. But she's also added some better grappling to her game. She's and that coming back with that arm triangle choke was fantastic stuff.
Yeah, it reminded me of Brock Lesnar and Shane Carwin, actually.
Yeah, I can see that parallel.
Yeah, and it was very clear she was after that choke, and she was just dogged about it. And once she had Davis's arm isolated, it was all hers. But Davis looked really good in the first round.
She did, yeah. Davis looks like she came back. It looks like she's very much the fighter she was when she left, and it looks like she can still. I was kind of worried that she may not be able to compete with that style at this point. Like fighters like Holly Holm, fighters like Juliana Pena, fighters at the top of the division may just be too much for her. But the truth is that she's still so tough and so aggressive and so willing to work from any position and she's a crafty vet. She's got a lot more savvy in there than a lot of other fighters because she's been in it a lot longer. So I'm still interested to see what she can do after that fight.
Yeah, definitely. And then in the opener flyweight, Brandon Moreno and Brandon Benoit split decision. I don't know how anybody saw that fight any other way than for Moreno, but it was pretty wild slugfest. Some good action in there. But I still don't understand how it was a split decision.
Yeah, no, I thought Moreno won it too. Benoit, other than dropping Moreno once, didn't have a lot other consistent offense. And it's exactly what I wanted to see this fight after Moreno beat Smolka because I thought it was good to test him against somebody who has the athletic potential to be a top flyweight, but doesn't have enough of the tools and can hit hard. Something that Smolka is much more the underwhelming athlete, really crafty grapple wrestler. And so this ended up, I think, being a good test for Moreno, being a good proving ground for him to actually have to survive somebody who can punch and who can hang with him athletically and who he has to actually plan around for his game. And he showed that he can do it. So I'm happy with the win, even if it's not an amazing, make you think Moreno's on his way to title contention right away.
Yeah, no, he definitely needs some seasoning before he's even thinking about before he even puts the word Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson in his mouth. I would want a year or two at least.
But it solidifies his position at the edges of the top 15 right now, and in a division with only 25 guys in it.
Yeah. He's moving on up. And then in the preliminary headliner featherweight, Ryan Hall beat Gray Maynard. Unanimous decision fight that got a lot of boos and some heckling on Twitter. I liked it. I thought Ryan Hall did really well. Nice kicking game. Scored. He was actually making good contact with Maynard. These weren't some of them were Hoist Gracie kicks, but some of these hook kicks were legit, and Maynard had no answer. And so, when Hall did initiate grappling exchanges, Maynard was able to defend himself, but most of the time he just avoided the ground game. I do not, Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report was bitching on Twitter that this was, Ryan Hall should be docked for going to the ground, throwing himself on his back, et cetera, but the guy's doing something. He's trying to force an exchange, and in a fight, he's totally dominated on the feet. It's not like he was avoiding the fight. He was taking the fight to Maynard. Maynard was the one that was avoiding the fight.
I feel two ways about this, very much. First of all, I'm the kind of guy who defended Clay Guida against Gray Maynard for his game plan in that fight.
Yeah.
And I am not disappointed in Ryan Hall for not trying to box with Gray Maynard.
That would have been stupid.
It would have been stupid. I will say, though, that was an ugly, ugly fight.
It was.
It was really ugly and awkward looking, and it's exactly the kind of thing that pisses the UFC off to no end, and that they are going to seriously be looking at, the first time Ryan Hall loses, let's cut him.
Entirely possible, but I just think that's unfortunate. I think the whole way they treat ground fighting, I think the fact that you can't crab walk at somebody is bullshit. And
Yeah.
I think what Hall is doing is really interesting when he gets a chance, to grapple, and it's not his fault guys don't want to engage in his game. And I think the kicking game, I mean, that was action. He was landing kicks, and it was good. I don't know, maybe they want a higher pace, but where were Maynard's kicks?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this may be the last fight for Maynard in there. I'm not saying that, like, the UFC is going to turn to Maynard and be like, "You are such a good boy. We will keep you after that terrible loss."
That was a shit show on his part.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, this is the kind of, like, Anderson Silva Talis Latis thing that, like, they did not forgive Talis Latis for a long time after that fight.
True, but Talis Latis was getting lit up on the feet and refusing to engage.
But it's still, it's how it looks, and like, that they're willing to be, like, reactionary to that kind of stuff. Like,
it's true, but that's the old Zuffa with WME. I mean, they just fired Chuck Liddell. Anything can happen. Anything can happen. Maybe
it's true. I don't know how Dana White's going to keep his couches warm now that Chuck Liddell's gone.
I know.
I think that was. He's painting a mohawk on a rock and putting it in the oven right now as we speak, just to heat it up to put on his leather sofa.
Entirely possible. Entirely possible. Let's keep running through the card. Bantamweights Rob Font and Matt Schnell. Font knocked him out in the first round, 3 minutes, 47 seconds. Font looked pretty good in this one.
Yeah, Font's a scary dude. He's got power. He's got a well-rounded game. He's not always the highest output kickboxer, but he gets power in everything. And unfortunately, like, he's been getting better at his striking and all that, but he tends to lead with too many power shots and without setting things up, and drive himself right into guys on straight lines too often. And Font just had his number for that.
Oh yeah. I mean, Schnell stirred the pot and caught the blender. It was a nice performance from Font, and he looks like a dangerous young man. And then you have lightweight Dong Hyun Kim. Not Stun Gun Kim, but the other Don Hyun Kim, beat Brendan O'Reilly by unanimous decision. I literally remember nothing about this fight.
Yeah, O'Reilly is not a good fighter at all, and I think this is kind of one of those things where, like, Kim's gotten knocked out a couple times now. He may have wanted to fight a little smarter, but it may just also be that without somebody just swinging at him wild the whole time, Dong Hyun Kim fights a lot different, and he just kind of physically outworked O'Reilly for 2 rounds, and I think O'Reilly may have won the last round off cage control and finally turning up his clinch striking a bit, but it was O'Reilly's just not athletic enough to hang.
No, and I don't think Kim is going to amount to anything either. I mean, he's a journeyman would be a kind description. Then you had a women's strawweight, Jamie Moyle, and defeated Kaylin Curran, unanimous decision in the opener. And pretty tough fight. There was a nasty cut. Thoughts?
Curran just continues to be a bust, I think, unfortunately. She may have got to the UFC too early. She had too much work to do with her game. She's getting pushed around by everyone. I mean, Moyle is 5'1" and got absolutely pushed around in her last fight by a bigger fighter. And Curran just had no way to separate, could not fight for an underhook to save her life against the cage, could not assert any physical dominance in this fight at all. And might be the end of her UFC run.
Yeah, and I won't be crying any tears over that. And then had two fights on the Fight Pass card. Anthony Smith beat Elvis Mutapcic, knocked out second round elbow and punches. Uh, Not a spectacular fight, but Smith looked pretty fearsome.
Yeah, Smith has an incredibly great power Muay Thai game, and it's just unfortunate that that's kind of the only thing he has, and it doesn't really come with a gas tank. But
That's true.
Mutapcic is not. I don't know. Unfortunately for Mutapcic, this might be. He's just not getting anything done in the UFC. He's a striker with really short arms, and he loves to counterpunch, but he waits too long, and Smith just lit him up from range. When Mutapcic had top control, he was good, but the moment this fight was standing, Mutapcic was lost.
Yeah. And then in the opener, light heavyweight, Devin Clark beat Josh Stansberry, unanimous decision, 30-27 on two cards, 29-28 on the others. Anything to say about that one?
Nah, two light heavyweight prospects that are a step below Cannonier and Kuta, guys that could improve or at the very least provide fights for other light heavyweights in the division. That division just needs all the bodies it can get.
It does. And I wouldn't mind seeing Stansberry and Kutalaba in a loser's match. I think Kutalaba would just basically pull his arms out of his sockets and beat him to death with them. But I think that would be fun. I mean, obviously.
District man.
Yeah, well, whatever. And so, anyway, that's a fight in review. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson survives a tougher challenge than expected from Ultimate Fighter winner Tim Elliott, 5 rounds. Johnson mostly dominated position and side mount, but Elliott made it awkward and threatened one. Was there just one serious submission attempt from Elliott?
Yeah, he only really had the one really good sub attack. Well, he chained it. I think he had.
Yeah.
He chained 2 submission attempts that were both reasonably deep, but the second one was the one that DJ had to fight out of for a really long time.
Yeah, but he did, and DJ had multiple submission attempts of his own, and there wasn't a great deal of impactful striking in that, although Elliott's awkward striking game clearly gave Mighty Mouse fits. I wonder if Mighty Mouse had longer to train specifically for Elliott, if that would have made much of a difference.
Did Mighty Mouse not have longer to train specifically for Elliott?
Well, that's obviously he did, because everybody in the world knew that Elliott was going to win as soon as the show started. So he had a full camp. Elliott's just an awkward dude then. So,
He is. He's a super awkward dude. And his cardio is fucking ridiculous.
It is. He reminds me of a flyweight Keith Jardine.
Yeah, it's sort of like Keith Jardine and Dominic Cruz had a baby.
Yes, what a horrifying idea that is. All right, and so, but nobody inherited the haircut. You would think that Cruz's haircut would have been dominant trait. And then Joseph Benavidez beat Henry Cejudo in a flyweight title fight, not title fight, but number one contender fight. In a fight where Benavidez won, I think he deserved to win, but I think we both agree that Cejudo looks like he has a brighter future coming out of that fight.
Yeah, I mean, Cejudo showed that he took the right lessons away from his fight with Demetrius Johnson. His striking is more powerful, it's more complicated, and he's wrestling more. And all of that is going to serve him better and better as his career goes forward.
Yeah, and moving to a serious camp, I think, was the key to that. And I noticed that this was a fighter who was listening to his corner. If you listen to what the corner was saying between rounds, Cejudo was listening and implementing the instructions. So that was pretty good. And then George Masvidal.
You don't get to be an Olympic champion without some serious ability to take criticism and a serious ability to process when things have gone wrong for you and learn from them and move forward.
Yeah, it's true. Although Cejudo's path to the gold medal was a little bit more charmed with luck.
Even still, no matter how charmed it could be,
it's true.
You don't get to that level. Like I think the biggest problem, the biggest potential knock on Cejudo is that he's comfortable in success. When things are going well, that's when he's comfortable and not working as hard as he could be. But I think he's showing that off of a loss to DJ and probably off this loss too, he's just going to keep pushing himself as hard as he can.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing it. So that is our show. We'll be back, next week? Lewis versus Abdurakhimov. Is that even remotely close to it? So that'll be interesting. It's definitely not a fight you would have seen headlining a while ago, but it's a general trend to push newer fighters. They've been doing it all year. Part of it is the cupboards are pretty bare, but I think Derek Lewis is a guy that fans are interested in.
I can't wait to see Lewis and Ngannou fighting in the co-main. I can't wait to see either of them again. Frankly, I don't care if they're not the most experienced or the best dudes in the world. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I agree. So they're both action guys in the main event and co-main event. So we'll have all the fixings for that. Knuckle Up, Care Don't Care preview, MMA vivisection, etc., etc. So be sure and follow us on Twitter at TheZaneSimon, at KidNate. Subscribe to YouTube, MMANation.com on YouTube. Subscribe to MMA Nation on iTunes. Get the audio without the ugly. Read us on BloodyElbow.com. Am I missing a plug?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah. All right. So Eugene will have Knuckle Up tomorrow, and we'll be back with etc., etc. So adios, MMA aficionados. Thanks, Zane. We'll see you next time.